Former flat earthers. What made you come round? I talked to a flat earther about my job working for a company that tracks ship locations, routes, and speeds by satellite. We also had ways of monitoring carbon emissions based on fuel consumption and known weather conditions. None of this would work at all if the Earth was flat. Not a jot of it. I could only explain the most basic concepts, but it was enough for him to understand and realize that I was right and that he'd been convinced by someone who had no practical experience of the spherical nature of the Earth. I think that's what really did it. My experience was really tangible. This happens, then we measure this, etc., etc. No theory, just practice. A bit like showing a child a rock dropping to the ground in order to explain gravity, rather than giving them the whole theoretical shebang. You know. Edit, sorry it's a bit rambling, I'm so damn tired. That's a great question, I'll try to explain it as simply as possible. Ships all over the world are traveling certain distances. Let's say ship A travels from location A to location B, and ship X travels from location X to location Y based on weather conditions and detailed information about the engine type and cargo load. We can calculate that ship A used amount A of fuel, and ship X used amount X of fuel. When the ships come into port, we check in with them. Ship A, did you use amount A of fuel? Affirmative. Great, so we'll log your carbon emissions as such and such an amount, and you'll need to purchase so and so an amount of fuel in port. For this calculation to work, the distance traveled is absolutely key. That distance can only be calculated based on the curvature of the Earth. Imagine a beach ball, and you draw two lines on it, both of the same length, one near the equator and one near the pole. Now imagine flattening the ball into a flat map. In order to read the map, those distances will actually look very different, because the map needs to be stretched or skewed in order to look flat. That is the sort of map a flat earther would use. You can't have a flat Earth that maintains the exact distances traveled that are measured all over the world at any given time. We are talking about thousands of ships and millions of journeys being tracked to within the meter. Our fuel consumption calculations are very good. We can estimate them almost perfectly, based on known factors, and none of these calculations could possibly work if the distance was not absolutely correct. The distance is completely dependent on the fact that the Earth is spherical. In order for these calculations to remain correct and the Earth to be flat, the ships that are moving around the Earth at measured speeds and distances would have to somehow trick us into seeing them move, which we track via multiple technologies, including satellite, and something a bit more akin to mobile phone tower pinging technology, at totally different speeds than they actually do. Then they would have to calculate what the fuel consumption would be, based on the premise that the Earth is spherical, and the captains would then have to tell us a lie when they get into port, and also lie to the fuel vendors about how much fuel they need. They'd all have to be in on it, and they'd all have to be mathematical geniuses, coming from all different countries, languages, companies. The very notion is ludicrous and is on par with, well, I won't say it. It would require a conspiracy to exist on a level that is not only impossibly complex and mathematically impossible, but it would also require almost every person who works at sea to be both a genius and a liar. Now, I don't mean this in a disparaging way at all, but the average captain of a ship that meets the emissions reporting requirements is just an ordinary bloke with a mid-level education, and there's thousands of them working all over the world at any given moment. These are not evil geniuses. They are middle-aged Greek men who don't like using onboard computers and think EU emissions regs are bad for business. These are analog processes, they can't just be intercepted and skewed to preserve the lie, it's just math. The only sophisticated tech involved is the tracking technology, and this is not one layer of tech. It's multiple layers that all sync up with each other, and again, some of this is very analog stuff. I am definitely gonna steal that one. No more stupid debates, this is the answer. Doesn't work. Some flat earthers hold that the Antarctic is a barrier to possibly more land. which allows increased resources available to the elite few whom control the Penguinati, the military force encircling the entire circumference of the spherical disk world to prevent anyone reaching the true Antarctic land mass, simultaneously utilizing radar to scan the entire Earth's circumference to prevent trespassers. When you go to Antarctica, the Penguinati tourist and elite conspiracy agents take you to somewhere else in the world that looks like what you expect Antarctica to be, with special towers that relay the GPS coordinates of your location to trick you into believing the world is a globe. Actual argument I have heard from Flat Earth on multiple occasions, minus the Penguinati trademark. Edit, Flat Earther reacts to YouTube comments. Expansive land past Antarctica. Timestamp 120. I spent about a year infiltrating the Flat Earth community on Instagram. I garnered a decent following with an account dedicated to Flat Earth travel photos, an intentionally absurd premise. In that time I learned quite a bit about the community, including how to discern the trolls from the real deal. The majority of legit Flat Earthers are extremely distrustful of anything the government says or does. These same people are 9/11's truthers, Holocaust deniers, and anti-vaxxers, and they connect these conspiracies together. Many of them have also attached Flat Earth theory to religion, magic, or mysticism. Before my infiltration I'd always considered conspiracies fun. Like they were the fan fiction of real life. Now they mostly make me sad. For all the phony accounts like mine, there are still plenty of people out there willing to drop a couple of $100 on a Flat Earth convention. The inclined seat conformed perfectly to his body, strategically placed in the cockpit so he could reach no buttons with outstretched arms. The straps anchored him firmly in place, they were uncomfortable but necessary. The engine burst to life with a roar that burned out all the other audio, the vibrations tore through his body and he felt his body sink back into the seat as the G-force began to take hold. The captain was watching the readouts on the LED displays and monitoring their trajectory as the acceleration began to peel his thoughts away. There was no more room in his brain, it had been filled by pure fear. The boosters grew with greater ferocity as they lifted higher into the sky, the sun beaming down on the left side of the shuttle. But faster they went. Through max Q and higher into the stratosphere until the engines grew quieter, the air more silent, and the vibrations became less violent. They were approaching space, the final frontier. An hour later, and with the path of the shuttle a success, he noticed as his raw emotions withdrew that his body felt funny, head hair drifted aimlessly across his eyes as the captain's pen hovered in mid-air, and he knew the impossible was true, his childhood dream, he was in space. Weightless. The captain turned around to him, and motioned him to unhook his seat belts. He did as he was commanded. They both left their chairs and glided over to the tiny glass windows to overlook the magnificence of Earth. Obviously there's a lot of miming around here, but if the question was meant seriously we should understand what exactly Flat Earth belief is. As Dan from the channel Folding Ideas puts it in his excellent video In Search of a Flat Earth. Nominally, Flat Earth is a belief that the Earth isn't a globe, but is actually flat, a fact that has been kept from us, meaning normal people, by a nebulous, powerful them for nefarious, inscrutable purposes. I think it's worth considering that the shape of the Earth might actually be the least important belief of Flat Earth. Flat Earth is a syncretic, biblical belief that is both evangelical and apocalyptic. The world is flat. Not a flat earther. But I was a 9/11 truther, I guess you could say, insofar as I thought it was an inside job. I was heavily influenced and believed in multiple conspiracies in the Zeitgeist film as well. There was a never-ending source of dark, shadowy this and thems controlling everything behind the scenes. I think there were a few factors that helped me escape that. Losing my father. It was such a life-changing event at that age that it made me reconsider everything in my life. Some light training in evaluating information. I learned about how to vet sources, primary, whether something was actually news or just an opinion/editorial, etc. Ironically, this education came before I was duped. After my dad died, suddenly this started to kick in more. Lack of time/means to dig myself a deeper hole. I started college shortly after my father passed, and a full-time job took up all my time. I had none to buy further into the newest crazy bullshit. I had no Facebook/Twitter/IG/etc. No smartphone or texting. My primary use of Reddit once I discovered it was for r/Naruto, r/Bleach, Rage Comics, and Advice Animals. So all in all, I think the time away gave me time to detox. If I had been on social media as I discovered those things, I can only imagine I very well may have become a Q believer as well. Looking back, I see how gullible I was in that moment, fooled by the onslaught of half-truths and clever logic of the various theories. I know better now, and I should have known better then, but I've been humbled to the fact that everyone is vulnerable to this sort of stuff. To think otherwise is deluding yourself. Congrats. I spent a brief period as a 911 truther, which is bizarre considering I saw it happening live on TV. I watched 1 or 2 conspiracy videos online when they were newish. They asked questions that couldn't be answered, raised doubts, highlighted coincidences, etc. Basically, I became convinced a missile hit the Pentagon, and that was my belief. I wasn't obsessive over it, just a background belief. Then I came across a discussion online, a debate about 9/11s, and one poster was pointing out there was wreckage of the plane all over the Pentagon grounds, and I was like, nope, relating to something in one of the videos. However, within seconds of looking online, I found the photos of the wreckage, and just about everything else. To cut a long story short, the online documentaries, 911 conspiracy videos, I had previously watched were in fact very carefully crafted pieces of propaganda designed to make the viewer cast doubt on the event by highlighting very specific and selective pieces of information, out of context, distorted, or just flat out untrue, in order to hint that some vague conspiracy took place without ever specifying that conspiracy. Now, I'm very much a skeptic. The dead giveaway to these type of conspiracy videos is that they never actually detail the conspiracy itself, from the ground up. They never provide a coherent timeline, never provide direct evidence of the conspiracy itself. It's all indirect. Look at this discrepancy, look at this coincidence, look at this oddity, can't explain that, therefore conspiracy. Same with Boston bombing conspiracies, Sandy Hook, all that. Identical process involved each time. I actually, masochistically, spend some time debunking conspiracies online every now and then. It's largely a futile exercise, but the most simple approach is just to ask someone to detail the conspiracy with credible evidence. They almost all instantly fall apart. To this day, no one has ever provided a coherent 9/11 theory, not even the guys at AE 911 who make money from this stuff. It's a bizarre hobby to say the least. Congrats. The dead giveaway to these type of conspiracy videos is that they never actually detail the conspiracy itself, from the ground up. They never provide a coherent timeline, never provide direct evidence of the conspiracy itself. It's all indirect. Look at this discrepancy, look at this coincidence, look at this oddity, can't explain that, therefore conspiracy. 110%. Some modern conspiracies have gotten smarter and provide really shitty proof that has 10 levels of sourcing that end up back at some 8chan/pol thread that isn't even accessible but just a screenshot. Nonetheless, most conspiracies follow that same look. I'm asking a question that can't be answered right now. If you don't know the appropriate context, that must mean there is some dark figures pulling strings, right? What frustrates/terrifies me is watching other people fall into this now. I know what worked for me, but by and large outside intervention isn't what pulled me out of the abyss. I'm never sure of what to do other than follow up their questions with more questions to try to get them see the errors themselves. The original conversation wasn't specifically about flat Earth, but it was a collateral belief damage. It started with him wanting proof that SARS-CoV-2, coronavirus, was real. He claimed it had never been isolated or photographed, because all he saw in the media was CGI, that it didn't make sense that a virus from a bat could infect a human because we, as he did correctly state, are not bats. I linked him multiple peer-reviewed, pre-COVID scientific articles about zoonotic diseases, including the prevalence at which they come from bats/birds/livestock, an interview with a USAID Predict researcher, also the .gov website reflecting his association with the facility, about how they anticipated the virus, and a National Institute of Health primary article photographing an isolated SARS-CoV-2 virus. That's when he said it was all lies and that I probably believe the Earth is round and that we went to the moon, which is when I made the comment about believing anything, since clearly he would have disregarded round Earth proof anyway as well. I really wish I would have screenshot the conversation before he deleted it all. They were, if I do say so, pretty solid shutdowns. Okay, I get the question is funny and all, but I actually did believe, for a time, that the Earth was flat. I was raised in a very religious family, and basically came to the conclusion that the Bible declared the Earth was flat, because since I believed the Earth was created in 7 days, the idea that God set the stars in the sky in one day made much more sense if the stars were simply points of light in a sort of snow globe formation extrapolated onto a bigger scale. Otherwise, he took one day out of the 7 to make a septillion or so balls of flaming gas, all with their own planets, and set each one into galaxies before breaking for lunch. It just didn't make sense to me that he would spend 5 days on one planet, and make the creation of the trillions of other stuff in the universe a little footnote. I was confronted about this belief a couple times, only one of which wasn't laughed off. That single person who engaged started a serious discussion, presenting much more evidence for the globe Earth, and eventually told me to watch Carl Sagan. The Cosmos series was on YouTube, and once I watched it, I had to know more. Finally, a video from the channel Minute Physics convinced me, in no uncertain terms, that the Earth was round. All it took was one quote, which I still remember leaving chills down my spine: "You should have put a serious tag on this question." The trouble is that there are very few people who have ever been genuine conspiracy theorist flat earthers. Flat earthers get a lot of attention these days because they are such a spectacle. But the truth is that they've never been able to fill even a medium-sized convention center. If you look at the Flat Earth YouTube channels, their view counts are extremely low, and at least half of those viewers are disbelievers who are just there for a laugh and to hurl insults. The view counts that Flat Earth channels get are a tiny fraction of what Flat Earth detractors like Simon Dan get. And the subset of that group of people who have ever been Flat Earth believers that are now former Flat Earthers is a smaller group still, even if it's not unlikely that it's larger than the subset that are current Flat Earth believers. And then of that group, many of them are pretty tired of answering this question, as it's what most people ask first when the topic ever happens to come up. Another not me but might have convinced someone else story. I was on the bus home and a flat earther decided to talk with me about something. What it was, but the conversion quickly turned to the Earth being flat. Humoring him, I asked, if the Earth is flat, how does GPS work? He told me that GPS comes from cell towers. I pressed him and told him that can't be true because I have an app on my phone that shows my location on a PDF when I have no cell signal. I use it when I go hiking in the mountains. He told me that the GPS signal is so much stronger than the cell phone signal that I would still get it up there. Just then we passed through a tunnel and I asked him why, if the signal is stronger, do I lose GPS tracking in a tunnel? He seemed confused and just said, "I don't know, I'm just asking questions." As a general rule, all flat earthers are just trolls, and I tell that to their face if it comes up. That out-of-hand dismissal by itself tends to shake them. But I was in a playful mood that day. A question I wonder about is, can a flat earther ever stop being one? I think it's a question for psychologists. Being a flat earther isn't about facts, it's a way to gain an identity and reassurance. A flat earther wants to not walk the earth not understanding anything and not knowing who to trust. It's a way to carve a sense of self out of a sense of incompetence. Instead of walking around as an idiot, now you tell yourself you are one of the few who knows the truth and can't be tricked like the other headless sheep. To stop being a flat earther would be to give up this coping mechanism to deal with your own mediocrity. Even worse, it would be admitting you were wrong, and therefore again reaffirming the thing you were running away from to begin with, the fact that you are just another idiot who doesn't know anything. So I doubt anyone can give up being a flat earther without first overcoming the original psychological need that brought them there in the first place. Just like any other cult, yes, I'm talking about you Tumpists out there. The more invested you are in the lie, the longer and harder the withdrawal process will be.